All right, thank you, and welcome to session number 8 of this workshop, which is about innovative and commercial use of spectrum in adjacent sectors. My name is Dirk Lindemeyer, and I'm co-founder and chief commercial officer of Sky5, which is a Nokia spin-off from 2019, focusing on broadband connectivity for the aviation industry as one of these adjacent sectors we want to speak about. And I feel honored to moderate this panel today. With me are some very competent people to speak about adjacent sectors, which is Amy Wiemann. She's with Viasat, Vice President of Government Affairs and Policy. Also with us today is Dean Brenner. He's with Qualcomm, Senior Vice President of Spectrum Strategy. And I'd also like to welcome Walid Sami. He's with the European Broadcasting Unit, Senior Project Manager for Technology and Innovation. And finally, of course, Mohammed Al-Janoubi, the CRTC Director for Spectrum Allocation. Welcome all. Thank you for joining the session. And I would actually like to give the first word to Mohammed and give us his views, introductory views on using spectrum commercially and innovatively in adjacent sectors. Mohammed, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. And we are very happy to have you and to have everyone here in this workshop that we work with ITU on. In my presentation, I will talk about adjacent, allowing and fair access to adjacent sector, and I will concentrate particularly on the sharing of spectrum, as it's very, very important when we talk about allowing adjacent sector. Next slide, please. So in my slide, I will cover 4 topics. In the beginning, I will talk about the spectrum sharing scenarios. Then I will talk about the licensed and unlicensed access. After that, I will present something about the trials and test and how it's important to promote sharing of spectrum and making innovative use of spectrum and allowing adjacent sector and different sectors for sure. And at the end, I will talk about, and I will conclude my presentation to talk about what regulators need to do to allow and enable sharing. Next slide, please. So in the beginning, when we talk about spectrum sharing, we are talking about something that, in my opinion, will be crucial in the next years, given the huge demand of spectrum and the huge increase of spectrum from different users and different industries. When you talk about spectrum sharing means many different things for different wireless industries and sectors. As an example, we have the applications of ISM and SRDs, and we have cellular and unloading data through Wi-Fi and coexistence of 5G, and also the high-speed mobile network pooling spectrums in order to meet the big data and demand without any congestion in spectrum. Next slide, please. So when we talk about sharing and how dynamic can spectrum sharing here, you can see in the slide here the line of the slow or static sharing, which is the traditional sharing approaches, going toward the fast dynamic sharing, which we are looking all for from the industry to be adopted in the next and coming years. And you see here, but in the bottom of the slide, some examples about the sharing, categorizing them among how fast is it and how traditional is it. When we talk, for example, about the traditional sharing criteria, which work on fragmenting the spectrum on geographical area. And I mean, right now we are talking about the dynamic spectrum sharing on 5G. We are talking about the spectrum commons of unlicensed use through Wi-Fi or through other applications. So what we are looking from the industry right now, we are looking for more faster and more dynamic sharing to be adopted in the next years. Next slide, please. So, I mean, in the coming 3 or 4 slides, I will be talking about some examples and what we are looking for from them. For example, when we talk about long-term sharing access, and the example of the migrating the use from terrestrial, for example, surfaces toward the mobile surfaces, either, for example, in 700 or 800 previously. We knew at certain time that we are going that way. However, the transitional were very, very slow. So what we are suggesting is to have transitional sharing arrangement during the phase of the migration toward the other applications, in order to have more efficient use of spectrum of some frequency bands that we know it will be migrated, that we know it will be vacated for different application and different services. And we see these kind of things, for example, right now in some of the terrestrial frequency bands, which used for legacy TV terrestrial broadcasting. We see some usage for TV white spaces to adopt more smarter or to adopt smart and innovative use of spectrum to provide, for example, IoT applications or broadband application in some parts where the band is not used and allocated efficiently for broadcasting services. Next slide, please. So we are talking also about and suggesting commercial government spectrum sharing. This is very, very important. We have some legacy spectrum that used for example, old governmental usage or some military applications. We believe that in order to have better access of spectrum, we need to adopt sharing criteria, and we have the example of CBRS in US that happened on last year. We believe this is a very good example to adopt and to utilize the C-band, having more sharing criterias, enabling mobile application and enabling also the current use of for example, governmental or military use and applications. Next slide, please. So also, the database access and white space spectrum sharing is a very, very important key and tool to enable sharing. Trusted database that contain real-time information about local spectrum and frequencies are very important and very essential to be adopted in the next years, in order to have better sharing, to allow adjacent sectors and to allow different application and services in the next future. Next slide, please. Also, this is very, very important when we talk about sharing for mobile network. I mean, people are discussing right now having dynamic spectrum sharing for 5G, also spectrum pooling. The other thing is a regulator needs to look on enabling passive and active sharing, and as well as when we talk about trading, or I mean partially or fully, we are not talking for sure about some technical sharing, but it's very important that regulator adopt this kind of regulatory actions in the market, in order to have better use of spectrum, in order to have shared access for different operator in the spectrum as well. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I mean, talk about the importance of test and trial to enable new technologies and new sharing techniques, and to enable as well the all adjacent and all different sectors that need the spectrum in the coming years. When you talk about, for example, test licenses, it's very important that regulators adopt this kind of licenses to allow and facilitate the research and developing in each country of having such an application and having such technologies and techniques to share the spectrum. And when we talk about the trial licenses, the important is to have test the actual market demand and not having novel solution services offering these services. Next slide, please. And this slide will be my last slide, and it will be talking about what regulators need to do to facilitate sharing. I believe regulators need to have 4 important actions. First of all, regulators need to look on having and facilitating tests and trials The other thing, providing more unlicensed spectrum, having more bandwidth to those spectrum. We have heard yesterday that, for example, US have doubled, and some countries are considering. Today, my dear colleague Mohammed Abdel Qadir mentioned that we are in CITC considering and studying expanding the Wi-Fi and unlicensed applications, licensed bandwidth here in the kingdom. We believe that having more bandwidth for the unlicensed spectrum would enable would enable more broadband applications, and will open the chance for the industry to see and to foresee research and development, having more I could say applications and smart applications in those bands. The last thing that we suggest and recommend regulator to do is to consider updating the international regulations in the next and the coming WRCs. Right now we have bands allocated for different applications. We don't have the international, in the international regulations, we don't have that flexibility to sharing. We see some sharing techniques. We see some sharing technologies coming. We believe that the next and coming WRCs need to consider those applications, and we need to have resolutions on the matter in order to enable that, in order to enable the international harmonization on such technologies. And the other thing, to allocate spectrum bands for different sharing users on a national basis. What we done in CITC, we have considered the sharing techniques, and we have considered having different, having more access for different users, and to have better use of spectrum through our public consultation of fostering and commercial and innovative use. We have special part, or we had a special part on sharing and exclusive access, open sharing as well. Right now we are on the phase of studying the received contribution from different stakeholders, and we will address for sure the sharing criteria and sharing aspects in our Spectrum Outlook 2020 and 2025. With this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much, and the floor is back to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mohammed. Really useful. I'm just looking at questions from the audience. There aren't any, but I would have one from your public consultation. Can you kind of see certain demands coming from industries? Is there certain industries which you have already seen that would require special treatment, or are you more looking at a complete toolbox, which then practically any industry could actually make use of, because their demands might very much vary depending on what industry they're coming from? Is there any insights you can give us on that?
Yes, actually, we have heard, as I mentioned, our public consultation was raised toward the international and national stakeholders. I will talk about the shared part. We have received interesting responses on the importance of having more spectrum in the 6 gigahertz band, to have expanded for Wi-Fi 6E applications, starting from 5.925, going up to 6.4.25. Also, there are some industrial agencies or some industrial organizations suggesting going forward, such as the US approach up to 7.125. This is one aspect, and also the other aspect, which is for sure the 5G aspects, given that that we are considering also having the millimetric wave to be released soon in the kingdom. The other third very important aspects was matters related to emerging technologies, what to do in HIBs, HABs, V2X, the bands for such an application to enable commercial and innovative use in the kingdom. All of these things together we are considering, and it will be clear very soon in our Outlook 2020-2025.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sure there was lots to read there in the consultation. I can absolutely imagine that. Okay, thank you, Mohammed. Then let's move on to keep time here. The next session, actually, I would I would give you a very short overview of the aviation sector and its communication needs myself. As said, so we are a company that focuses on broadband services for the aviation industry, and the very short presentation is going to be about that. Next slide, please. Just to look at the industry in the Middle East as a whole, to make us all aware of what size of an industry that is. Last year, and this was apparently prior to the COVID crisis, some 200 million passengers departed or arrived in the Middle East, and that's more than Saudi Arabia. That's the entire Middle East here. And the economic activity supported by air transport in the Middle East as a whole was $213 billion per year, and 68 billion of that is direct GDP, and the rest is indirect or then induced effect. So it's quite a substantial industry in the Middle East. 3.5 million jobs are supported by air transport, either directly or again indirectly, and as such, of course, an industry very well known in the Middle East, and with some of these very iconic airlines also acting as ambassadors for the region and as drivers of economic growth there, domestically and internationally. Next slide, please. The aviation industry, not surprisingly, has communication needs, has connectivity needs as well. And these needs you can generally subdivide in two domains. One is operational efficiency, and one is the generation of what we call in our sector ancillary revenues, everything that goes beyond ticket sales. Now, the industry has been operating at wafer thin margins already prior to the COVID crisis, and now with this thing happening this year and hopefully coming to an end next year. Of course, the pressure to reduce costs, to become more efficient, and generate revenue that go beyond pure ticket sales has never been higher. Thirdly, third need for connectivity here is really to look at ways of innovatively fighting the new COVID-19 safety protocols, which are being imposed on airlines and airports by aviation regulation. There are many use cases where connectivity can help, where real-time communications can help an airline to fly more cost efficiently again and become profitable again, and also implement some of these safety measures in a smart manner. I'm not going to go through examples here. In the interest of time, if you're interested, a topic I can speak about for hours, but believe me, connectivity is a vital need of the airline industry, and has never been important than now. Now, one of the challenges we see is that the business case for connectivity for an aircraft is often difficult to make for an airline, and that's why you don't see all aircraft connected yet. And airlines are generally asking for more performance at a lower TCO to actually make their business case, as today often it's actually difficult to make. And that's where the innovation comes into play. If you go to the next slide, please. This is an innovation that has been implemented in Europe already some 2 years ago, and it's really about using wireless communications, cellular technologies for connecting aircraft from the ground, in addition to the existing systems that connect aircraft from the space. And there are some very visible performance and cost benefits that airlines have, and those things are typically convincing enough to actually need to connect an entire fleet and not just some of the fleet. And that then brings the true benefits of digitization. There's a bit of a comparison here. What we do when we use cellular technology, we connect the aircraft from the ground, so from 10 kilometers below, which has a very understandable impact on latency. And the lower the latency, the better the performance. So even with a big pipe and high latency, as we know, TCP doesn't like that. So we're going to see poor performance. That's different here. We can really crank up the performance. We can densify more easily by adding base stations, by adding sectors based on where air traffic density is. And we can also take advantage of the large economies of scale that this ecosystem, the cellular wireless ecosystem, has been produced. So there's about a factor of 1,000, we believe, between the satellite industry and the wireless industry, and these economies of scale are usable. So as we are using standard 4G and 5G equipment on a dedicated frequency band on the ground. All of these economies of scale, they become accessible and unfolding cost benefits. And then maybe a fourth benefit here is that simply the amount of effort that is required to modify an aircraft, to retrofit an aircraft, is relatively low. As you can see it here, the system, the antenna is about the size of a coffee cup and can be mounted very quickly. We don't take 8 hours for mounting an antenna. These 8 hours stated here are the complete retrofit from nose to tail of the aircraft, including Wi-Fi, access points, service, modem units, and so on and so forth. In aviation, we can't just take a screwdriver and put it on, but there's a little bit of engineering work required here. Next slide. Just letting you know how the solution looks if it's being implemented. So essentially, as said, we are connecting aircraft from the ground, and this is something that can work perfectly well in harmony with an existing satellite systems on the larger jets, for example, to augment capacity, or then on the smaller jets like turboprops, regional jets, where sometimes satellite systems might be a bit too big. They can be used as sole connectivity means. And the idea here is, and this is again thanks to the cellular ecosystem, is to provide an open solution. So one where we have one network and many devices connecting to it, just like we have it on the ground. And there are a couple of vendors who are building such avionic terminals. We call them air-to-ground terminals. You see some pictures here. This is real equipment. 2 of them are in commercial operations. The third one is currently under development. And the idea here is to give airlines a choice, so that basically when there is a network, there are different terminals available for different aircraft sizes, aircraft types, and we can connect the aircraft as we would connect a cellular device to the network, and then implement subscriptions rather than long-running contracts, which is another good thing for airlines to have. This goes further. It also goes further in the public safety domain. So a lot of missions, aerial missions, would benefit from connectivity. Transmission of camera images, for example, from police helicopters or other law enforcement authorities to the forces on the ground, and even for urban air mobility, we do see a need for reliable connectivity in the air, as the whole concept of managing air traffic is substantially different from how we are today managing air traffic from air traffic control centers. That should hopefully serve as an introduction. We think this is innovative, and it is commercial because it meets the demand of airlines for affordable broadband connectivity in the sky to become more efficient and make up for some of that revenue that they have lost through poor load factors, as we are currently experiencing them, as one concrete example. Thank you for listening. I will, since there are no questions, pass it on to Amy from Viasat. Amy, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dirk. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. So appreciate my friend Mohammed and CITC for helping organize this, the ITU, and certainly Forum Global for making this all function well. So as we all know, this has been a unique year. And as we all can imagine, looking back, planning ahead probably would have been something we would have liked to do more of. And sort of in an analogy to that, certainly planning ahead from a spectrum standpoint is critical. So again, I appreciate all the discussion that's being spurred by CITC and getting us all together today. So whether it's planning for the ITU and all the work that we're doing for the World Radio Conference, or CITC and their consultation with regard to IMT 2020 and beyond, all of these things are coming into play in our planning as far as our network, how we build, design, operate, and the criticality of having certainty within that spectrum framework is critical to our business. So if you would go to the next slide, I'll give you a quick background on who we are, just in case folks don't know about us. We've been around for about 35 years, doing everything from operating, design, build, building every sort of everything that you can imagine except for the bus when it comes to satellite services. We do Earth exploration, we do direct to home, broadband services, services on airlines as Dirk does. This is a large part of our business, government services, anything that provides broadband to the end user, we have worked around. We have about a fleet of satellites, five of them up in the air now. We actually just purchased the rest of KA-SAT over Europe and part of the Middle East. And we are right now building 3 satellites that will cover the Americas and Europe and the Middle East, and then Asia Pacific thereafter. And those will be coming in the next couple years. So we're excited about those. Those will each have over a terabit of capacity, something that will be, from our perspective, game changing from a geo perspective. And we're excited to get this to end users as quickly as humanly possible, and see the benefits of that. Next slide, please. So we are deploying our services to a number of verticals. As we say, we can be here, there, and anywhere. In the air, as I mentioned, we're doing a lot of works with airlines currently, government aircraft, business jets, anything in and around the aviation sector. And as Dirk mentioned as well, it's really revolutionizing the aviation industry, not only from, you being able to sit in your seat and stream Netflix or whatever you want to stream and do your work on the 14-hour flight, as I did from here to the Middle East recently, but you can also get the benefits of the efficiencies in the cockpit, efficiencies as far as the data that's coming in and out of the airline, tracking as far as the black box, et cetera, things like that. On the ground, we do direct to home broadband. This is a large part of our business. In this whole COVID situation, we've had a huge increase in capacity demand. Our e-learning, as you can imagine, is up. Telehealth, teleworking, everything we provide broadband for has exploded. And I think every sector is seeing this from a broadband perspective. And clearly we know that there is even more demand today to get our services and other services, 5G, et cetera, around the world, such that people who are working at home, doing education at home, can effectively, connect and keep that learning and those businesses going. Another sector that is growing for us is our maritime business. We are already connecting several in the exploration side of things, cruise ships, et cetera. So we are excited about this and looking forward to doing more of that in the future as our next fleet gets up and running. I will mention also that we are looking to launch an NGSO system at some point in the future, and some of these rules and regs around that is something that we're very interested in as well. If you could go to the next slide. Just to expand upon our airline business, these are the companies that we're working with today that is growing. And we're excited, as Dirk mentioned, to get this up and running a little bit more as we get hopefully past this COVID situation very soon. So next slide. So key to all of this, of course, is having core spectrum, right? We all rely on spectrum. Ka-band services are our key spectrum that we rely on. Not only do we rely on it, but as Mohammed was saying, sharing is caring, as I say. But for us, we actually use our spectrum incredibly efficiently. There's only so much there, and we share it with not only the other GSO operators in the Ka band, but the new NGSO operators that are coming online. That requires a lot of coordination, a lot of work, but I think we do it pretty well, and looking forward to this boom in new space that's coming. As I mentioned earlier, regulatory certainty is key for us. I mean, it takes a long time to build a satellite, and a satellite system, from the NGSO standpoint as well. So all of this takes years for us to design and build, and get up in the air and, make it happen. So when in working with CITC or the ITU, we try to impress upon the regulators and policymakers, the length of time it takes and the investment that's made to make sure that we have a stable environment to work within. So as we talk about protection of users, incumbent users, the adjacent services, satellite and 5G, we've had a lot of discussion over the last, I'd say 8 years, especially in the last two works. And I think this last WRC actually made some really good decisions as far as 5G spectrum and allocated, I think, a little over 17 gigahertz of spectrum in the millimeter wave bands, and that is a lot of spectrum, and I'm looking forward to seeing that go in, because there is an ecosystem that we are going to be integrating with, and we're excited about doing that. What we do know, though, is that it's hard to coexist in that same spectrum. So we were happy to see 26 gigahertz, as I think Mohammed and others have mentioned throughout this conference, really being deployed around the world, allocated around the world, and those deployments going in. I think that's a great band for IMT to exist, as well as some of the other bands that have been discussed in the mid and lower portions of the spectrum. So we're excited to see that. We're excited to work with those operators as well. But I would say that certainly from a Ka band perspective, we really rely on that core spectrum for us to do our business. The other thing I just wanted to mention, and I'll wrap up in a second, as I said, we and others are launching these new NGSO systems, and some of the things that we're also looking at is, how can we, coexist in our band and do it in a way that makes sense. There were a lot of rules around this that were adopted quite some time ago, about 20 years ago, in fact, at the ITU, around EPFD limits, and we're going to look to talk to CITC, ITU, and others about how we address, some of the aggregate interference issues that are popping up, as we move into this new space realm. But I really appreciate, again, the opportunity to speak today. Appreciate Mohammed inviting us, and look forward to any questions as we move forward.
Thank you, Amy. I just got told that we are collecting all the questions for the end, so that's why I haven't seen any so far. My mistake. I think then we'll move on to Dean from Qualcomm and his presentation.
Hi, thanks very much, Dirk. Thank you very much to CITC and the ITU, and of course, Forum Global for inviting me to participate today. For those of you who don't know Qualcomm, we're one of the world's leading developers of wireless technology, of course, 2G, 3G, 4G, and now 5G. And our technologies are also, of course, in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and basically any wireless technology you can think about, as well as we are one of the world's leading supplier of chips for wireless devices. And I wanted to organize my remarks to build on an excellent presentation from Mohammed. And let me start by saying, when we had 5G on the drawing board, in order to achieve this tremendous multi-gigabit, ultra low latency, ultra reliable communication, we took an all of the above approach to spectrum. So 5G from the very beginning was designed to use low, mid, and high band spectrum, and it was designed to use licensed, unlicensed, and shared spectrum. And of course, the mobile industry, as many of you I'm sure know, our first priority would always be to have exclusive access to licensed spectrum. That's always the first priority. But again, in order to achieve the degree of connectivity to have 5G really deliver on its promise, it was absolutely out of the question to solely rely on licensed spectrum. And so, of course, that meant we were obviously going to design a version of 5G from the ground up to operate in unlicensed and shared spectrum. And we've done that. That technology is called 5G NRU. It's been standardized in 3GPP release 16. It builds on the 4G technologies that used unlicensed spectrum, which we called LTE unlicensed or license assisted access. We're very excited about it. I'll come back to it in a second. But in terms of sharing of spectrum, first of all, is just inevitable because, again, there is a dearth of spectrum that can be cleared of incumbents entirely by a date certain nationwide. And so we have to get the kind of connectivity that people in all sectors of the economy are depending upon. We have to include unlicensed and shared spectrum. And then coexistence, of course, is just goes hand in hand with that. At Qualcomm, we have sort of our own vested interest in coexistence because since our chips use, for example, both cellular and Wi-Fi, we are very involved both in terrestrial communications and in satellite communications. We're very involved with one of the major new NGSO systems that's coming online. We have a legacy in satellite communications. We have our own vested interest in ensuring very, very good coexistence because in many cases, the two technologies that need to coexist are both technologies that use Qualcomm chips for connectivity. So I wanted to then turn to the sharing part of Mohammed's presentation and talk in particular about two very important sharing technologies that he mentioned, two very important technologies that use shared or unlicensed spectrum. The first, and they were in that nice chart that he had, which had slow sharing on one extreme and very, very fast sharing at the other extreme. These are two technologies that are in the realm of very fast sharing. And I totally agree. I think that's when we are designing new technologies for unlicensed and shared spectrum, that's where our efforts are. So the first he referred to as dynamic spectrum sharing, or DSS, for 5G mobile. Let me explain what that is and why that's so important. So in the old days, when, for example, we moved from 3G to 4G, and whenever we've launched a new G prior to 5G, we usually have always launched it in new spectrum. So we design a new generation of mobile technology, we find a new spectrum band that doesn't have any mobile in it, and we put the new technology in that band. But then the question is, how do we migrate legacy spectrum that has the prior G? So when we were launching 4G, we had a lot of bands that had 3G in them. How do we migrate those 3G bands to the new 4G? And the way we did that was this technique that those of us in the spectrum world call refarming. So the kind of the analogy is if you have a farm and it has tomato plants on it and you want to grow corn instead, you have to take out all the tomato plants and then replant the corn. And so what we do in spectrum with refarming is that we have to wait until a sufficient number of users all have phones or devices that support the new G. And at that time, we can transition the band, empty the band of the legacy G and put the new G in it. The problem with refarming is it takes years and years and years. So in many cases, it could take 10 years or longer to refarm a heavily used mobile band. And so that really limited access to the new G. It hamstrung the performance, the capacity, the gains to society from the new G. So in 5G, we work very hard at Qualcomm and with many of our partners, and especially in the infrastructure business, to design a technology that could go immediately into a legacy mobile band. And that's what gave rise to that's what dynamic spectrum sharing is all about. So if you have a base station that has the proper software, and you have a phone that has the proper modem and the proper modem software, you're able to, that base station can support both 4G and 5G in the same band. The legacy band does not have to be refarmed, and that has enabled us to launch 5G in bands immediately. So that is dramatically increasing the quality of service. It's dramatically achieving the rapid rollout of 5G, which is so important to so many sectors of the global economy. So then the other technique 5G NRU uses is a totally different form of way to share spectrum. So let me explain. Today, listen before talk, which is used both in Wi-Fi and in the 4G technologies for unlicensed spectrum, it's a time-based technique. So if there are 3 nodes that are sharing the spectrum, each node gets the spectrum 1/3 of the time, but each node then has to be quiet 2/3 of the time. So only one user can use the spectrum at a time, and it gets its proportionate share of the spectrum time. With 5G, though, we have this highly directional form of communication, very fast radio. And so we're transmitting in these very narrow beams, and we have the technology to form and steer the beams. So imagine a technique where a network where the 3 nodes can determine what direction, each node can determine what direction the other node is transmitting and receiving in. And then each node can transmit 100% of the time. All of a sudden, the level of capacity, the level of throughput for every node is substantially increased. So we're very excited about this new technology. It can go immediately into the 6 gigahertz spectrum that Chairman of the FCC, Ajit Pai, and Mohammed referenced in their remarks. And this can be a technology to look before talk, we call it, instead of listen before talk, to achieve a very, very high degree of wireless connectivity, which is what all of us want. So let me just conclude by saying the title of our program is, our panel here is adjacent, and has the term adjacent sectors. We don't regard any sector as adjacent, quite frankly. Every sector of the global economy wants better, faster broadband. And I think using the new techniques on the horizon, we're able to deliver that. Thanks very much.
Wow, super, Dean. Very, very insightful. Thank you very much for that. And as we are running a little bit short on time, I'll pass it straight over to Walid from the European Broadcasting Unit. Walid, your turn.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dirk. Thank you. Thank you to CITC, ITU, and Forum Global for inviting me to speak here. I'm Walid Sami, Senior Project Manager in the Technology and Innovation Department of EBU, and I'm involved mostly in spectrum-related matters. Next slide, please. So the EBU gathers, European Broadcasting Union gathers 115 public service broadcasters from 56 countries. You can find further information on the slide. And I will give in the next slides 3 examples of possible spectrum innovative use of interest to broadcasters mainly, and what could be the role of regulators on each of them. Next slide, please. So this is an example of new technology, which is 5G for broadcast distribution, that could enhance the existing and widely used broadcasting service by allowing its free-to-air operation or free-to-air reception, on 3GPP portable and mobile devices. This technology is already standardized in 3GPP and ETSI. Its possible use of the sub-700 MHz band in a sharing situation with DTT is currently under consideration. It allows for cooperative use of different types of existing transmitting infrastructure involving terrestrial and possibly satellite platforms without change in spectrum allocation. The role of regulators here would be to ensure certainty in spectrum allocation to broadcasting, to allow for such innovation, and also to encourage collaborative use of different networks. Next slide, please. The second example, this is for 5G-based technology as well, but used this time for content production, which is also known as program making and special events. And this includes the current functions provided by radio microphones, video links for electronic news gathering, or for program making. And this is a quite important subject for broadcasters, as well as for PMSE manufacturers and for telecom operators. And the use of public 5G networks and private 5G networks are both considered in this on the subject. And the private 5G networks could be required for this function due to stringent requirements for this use that MNOs would not find profitable to implement in their public networks. And although private 5G networks are already specified in 3GPP, they are also trialed and are required by many vertical sectors like factories, public protection and health, and others. There is still an issue with the spectrum access for these private networks. And here, regulators could help ensuring this access to spectrum of these 5G private networks. Next slide, please. And this third example, I think, was mentioned already by Mohammed and I think Mohammed in the beginning. This example is about solution to spectrum sharing through the case of applications that use white spaces in an existing used frequency band, assisted by a geolocation database. And this could be a good solution, provided it ensures protection of incumbent services and doesn't stop the development of these incumbent services. To be noted here that this solution requires certainty in the allocation of spectrum to the incumbent services, to allow the white space applications to find a sort of, let's say, long-term development potential. And regulators here can help facilitating the use of white spaces in different frequency bands by implementing the suitable regulations. Next slide, please. Here I show few EBU initiatives related to the previous subjects, and you can find the corresponding links to the websites. The participation in the 5G Media Action Group, the first one mentioned here, is subject to fees, so you have to subscribe as member of this media group. But the 5G for content production is a public project group open to any participant. We have already a few hundreds of registered participants in this group. And the ETSI joint group is ETSI EBU joint group is, I think, restricted to ETSI members, and for 3GPP it's well known. Next one, please. A few conclusions to finish with. So I think that innovation in spectrum use should first include the introduction of new technologies that allow existing services to improve and to better use their spectrum, including by sharing it with other services. And such innovation should not necessarily consist in continuously changing frequency allocations, especially that existing services need long-term certainty in their access to spectrum to be able to implement innovations. And finally, innovation should be a matter for all spectrum users. Next, please. So you'll find here a few links to follow the EBU activities. And finally, last slide is just to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Walid. And this concludes the session already. I think we have seen some really cool and exciting examples for innovative use of spectrum in adjacent industries, plus the tools to actually enable those. We would have normally gone for questions now, but since we have run out of time, we all would like to tell you, all speakers, that these questions are not lost. You can, we will answer them offline as soon as we've received them, and you can continue asking us questions, of course, already, or in addition directly via our published email addresses. I would like to thank all the speakers and especially CITC. Some, I think, real choices to make here, and not an easy decision, but a wealth of opportunity here in adjacent sectors. On behalf of all the speakers, thank you for the opportunity to speak here and present, and we'll now continue in a very short while with session number 9. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.